Hey everyone, today I wanted to cover a video on Maya 2023's new feature called Live Boolean. This is a new interactive non-destructive workflow for doing Booleans in Maya. I would say this is pretty close to what Blender has, and I'll actually show Blender's Boolean tool at the end of this video, so make sure to stick around for that. So let's just jump right into it, okay? Because right here you can see I have this model that's composed of a ton of Boolean operations, and this was all done again non-destructively. So the first thing that I want to cover is I will start with just covering how to use the tool, and then I can show kind of a time lapse on the workflow that I used to create this, and then I can also look into the Blender tool. So we'll start out just by creating a new object. So I'll start out with a nice simple cylinder. I'll shift right click to create that, and I'll just move it up in the y-axis, and I'll bring over my channel box editor and create this to have, a bit of a radius here and height. It really doesn't matter. I just need something with a good amount of geometry. Now I'm going to set this up to have 64 subdivisions, so we have plenty of geometry. When you're using Booleans, a good rule of thumb is to make sure that you have enough geometry for all of those cuts and details, because the less geometry that you have, the more artifacts that you're going to get. All right, so we have this here, and starting with this object, I can now create a new completely separate object. So I will start with actually creating a helix, right? A helix is a pretty complex object here. So I'll again move that up here, and I will, go into X-ray mode. So I'm just using a script to toggle that, but if you wanted to go in X-ray mode, you can do that here. And then I will now increase the height of this and increase the width. So we get something like that, and we're going to cut this detail right out of this cylinder, right? So you can get something pretty cool looking. I will have this, eventually kind of go above and below, and I will also increase the amount of coils that we have. So we have something like this, and now I will also increase the amount of subdivision. So, I'll give it something like 16, right? And maybe I'll keep the coils fine, the subdivision coil fine at 50. So I'll select the cylinder. I will select the helix here, and then I will go to the modeling toolkit, and right off the bat you can see that there's this new Boolean, or I should say updated Boolean, because Booleans have always been there. And if I left click that, it'll go through and create the operation. Then it'll pop up this new menu, right? And this is where the live Boolean comes into play. And this is really nice, because now you can see all of your Boolean operations here, and you can also turn things on, turn things off, to see your new objects. Okay, so now let's say I want to add in another object, right? And let's shift right click and without any object selected and create a new cube. So I'll create a cube, and we'll move this up and into position here, and I'm just going to scale this up. Right? So I'm going to scale this up and kind of create something similar to what I had down below. And you can see that there's going to be, a lot that it has to calculate here, and we'll just put this in position. And the nice thing about this is it doesn't matter, and you don't have to be perfect when doing this Boolean operations because of the non-destructive workflow, right? So for example, let's say I just select the cube, and now don't go back to the original cylinder. You have to go to this poly surface objects that is created, right? This is where all the Boolean information lives, right? Because again, if you see, you don't want to do this on the cylinder. So select the poly surface, or the new poly surface that it created, select your new cube that you created, and head over to the Boolean operation. Now, actually, if I head over to the top, you'll see that there's all these different types now, right? So there's union. I mean, there's always been union, difference, intersection, but there's new things or other things called slice, hole punch, cutout, and split edges, right? So I want to start by selecting this poly surface. So this is going to be my new Boolean object, right? So I can call this Boolean just so I know. And then I want to select a cube, and I will go ahead now and do the Boolean. And then now you'll see things are starting to show up here where we have the original cylinder, we have the helix, and the cube. And here's the cool thing, right? Now I can select this cube, right? And I can jump in and start editing this. So if I hold right click and go into edge mode. And let's just say I select all of these edges here, and then let's throw on a nice bevel, right? So hold shift right click and bevel edge. You can see that, boom, it starts to update and interactively and live updating on the model, which is fantastic. So I can hold point, enter a smaller radius if I want, or if I want this to be even tighter, I can select like 0.15. I can increase the segments to like 2. And you can see you start to get that nice detail, right? And if you're like, oh, this is looking good, but I want to clean this up a little bit, clean up the view, well, you can do that by going to the Boolean, and you can change the visibility modes here. So we have, this cube, you can actually hide it, which actually just hides it right in the outliner. And then you can just, set this to hidden, or you can do other things like, you can set it specifically to X-ray mode, set it to a bounding box, or set it to full-blown shaded. Or you can just do, again, the wireframe mode, right? But I'll keep this hidden so I don't have to see it. And then I can select the original cylinder here again, and then I can, hide that so that's not in the way. So you start to get this pretty cool object here. And let's say I want to bring that cube back, and you can just continue to edit that however you want. And I've been testing this over the past couple of weeks, and it's been working pretty well. I've been having a lot of good results with it. So let's say, for example, I'll set this back to 1, and maybe I'll increase the offset so we kind of have, or increase the fraction by like 0.5, so we have this kind of nice angle here, maybe 0.4. Then what I can do, is again select these bevels and just kind of double bevel it, right? So if I wanted to create something even more interesting, you can go back and bevel that again, and you get something pretty cool looking, right? So again, it's all live updating. Now I don't have to worry about updating or changing things throughout the mesh, right? And so now that we have this detail already cut out and updated, you can just continue this workflow, which is really nice. So for example, I can create another cylinder. So I'll just create that from the shelf right up here. And I already know that I created the cylinder to have 64 segments. So I'll do the same thing with this new cylinder piece. And I'll just kind of freehand it. And what this is nice for this new live Boolean workflow, it's that it's just really nice to do quick iterations and quick designs. You may not have any idea what you want to create, but with this new tool, you can iterate and create things really, really fast. So I'll select the Boolean object, this cylinder object, and I'll head over to my modeling toolkit and do another Boolean. All right, and so we can see that it's been added here, and it's looking good. And if I wanted to, I can grab that cylinder, and I can select these edges here, and I can do another bevel, and so that'll bevel nicely. And I can update this to be a little bit tighter, and just free form, change things along the way, which is really nice. Maybe I move this down and just give it some time to think and calculate, right? So I can see I had these turned on, so I can just, again, head back over here. And another cool thing is you can actually change the order of operation. So if you wanted to just move things and shift things around, and in this case, it's not really affecting things too much, but you certainly can change how things are done here, right? And I can set this to hidden and this original piece to hidden here. All right, so you can get really, really cool things really, really fast. And you can even use new features. So if I grab this plane here, and I will scale this up to something like this, and I will just set this to 1. I don't want that much more geometry. And then I will just grab shift right click, and I will grab my multi-cut tool, so just like this. And I'll control middle mouse click, so it puts it right in the middle. And I can do that here on both sides. So holding control, middle mouse will set it exactly in the middle. All right. And then I can bring these pieces up like so. And let's say, for example, I wanted to do this again. So I'll control middle mouse with the multi-cut tool. And, you can create this nice, little detail here. And I can move these edges down, I have no idea exactly what I'm trying to create. I just know I want to create a similar shape to what I did down here, right? And I can remove this middle edge with Control Backspace, right? And then now I can select our original Boolean mesh and this plane. And this is where I use that other Boolean operation, right? So again, it doesn't matter which one you select, right? It's just going to straight cut it out. But I can change the Boolean operation to, instead, maybe I do a split edges, right? And it's going to split edges now. And then I can, select these edges here and do a manual bevel and a manual cutout if I want. Another thing that I can do is, I can do a slice. A slice is going to straight up separate the geometry. So now you'll see that if I select these faces, it's completely sliced here, and you can now bevel these edges. That's how I achieved this result here, where I sliced it and then I did a nice bevel here, right? And now, so the overall workflow is just going through and iterating and updating and changing the designs as you see fit. And then once you're done, then you can go through and start beveling those details, right? So I'm gonna duplicate this mesh here, Control Isolate, Control 1 to isolate, and now, for example, if I wanted to bevel these edges that are kind of running along here, you can select those edges. Or let's say, for example, I want to take this piece here and Shift right click and do an extract, right? And so we can extract faces here, delete history. And now I can grab this separate face here. Now remember, I duplicated the object, so there's no history here anymore. And what's nice is that I can select these edges here. So what I do is select the faces, hold Control right click, and then I go to edges and then edge perimeter. And see how it selects all the edges running around the perimeter? Then I can select the middle edges, which is just one simple click, and I can hold Shift right click now and do a nice simple bevel, right? Now I'm going to head over to the channel box editor and turn off fraction. Sometimes you may need it, sometimes you don't. So you can see it gets a little bit messy over here, and that's fine. I'm just kind of testing some things out right now. And then for the offset, I can really start to tighten this up a bit so it doesn't, cause too many artifacts there. For right now, I'm okay with this. I'm just showing the overall workflow, and then I can increase the segments to something like 2, and then you get this nice clean bevel here, ignoring the artifacts, right? So that's the overall workflow, and that's what I had to do here. Now, keep in mind, I had to go in and manually, sometimes things won't bevel cleanly, so you'll have to manually cut in some edges and whatnot, so it comes out nice. So it just really comes down to whether or not how far you really want to use this mesh, right? Are you using this for a simple design? Are you using this for final production, right? Because you could take this, and then one of my favorite things to do is to take this now, make it live with this button up here, and then I can head over to the modeling toolkit and just start quad drawing, right? And because now you can make this, if you wanted to, into a sub D model using quad draw, right? And you can start to do that going around if you wanted to, or if you wanted to create a low poly model. I won't say you have to create a sub D. A lot of people ask me, hey, should we use this, or can I use Booleans? You certainly can. It just really depends on the final output, right? If this is a hard or a rigid non-soft body object or non-deformable object, yeah, go for it. It should be fine as long as things are clean. And it's also dependent on production, because I know VFX requires sub Ds. Some places don't, some industries don't. So just keep that in mind. As usual, it all depends. Okay. So really happy with this new tool, this new workflow. Just testing right now. I never jump to new software, new versions of software. I'll probably wait till Maya 2023.1 or 2 comes out, because right now I'm using Maya 2022.3 and 2020.4. Those are the two versions I'm using, but I really wanted to test out these new features, which look really, really nice. There's also the new retopologize tool, but maybe I can cover that in a new feature. And one thing to keep in mind as you are using this Boolean workflow is it works pretty well. You just have to make sure to, like I said, give the models enough geometry, because you're going to be doing a lot of complicated things and creating a lot of complex n-gons. So there are some issues with some shading. And you just have to weigh that with how close you're going to get to the model, the resolution and whatnot, and how much time you can manually go in and just add in your own geometry to prevent these artifacts from happening. Because at the end of the day, I then would create a triangulated version of this model to help minimize the artifacting, or if I was going to take this out, right? So if you were to compare that with this, you can see here, this is a crazy big n-gon going on here. So if I hold shift right click, you'd want to triangulate that here. And that should help when exporting it out to other packages. You'd want to do that in here before exporting, because you don't want to leave that up to the exporter or the importer. And again, duplicate your meshes, because I have, the non-triangulated version, and then I have the triangulated version when I was finally done. But again, this was a quick thing that I did, and I did this in barely an hour, and this was, for just testing out the tool. So I was pretty happy, again, with the overall results, even though there's a little bit of artifacting throughout. But again, a good test to see how well this tool is holding up. And I would say this is pretty close to what Blender has here. So now I'm jumping over to Blender, and you can see that, I have very similar objects that are ready to go. If you haven't used Blender, or you have, well, you need to make sure you go to Edit Preferences first and go to Add-ons and just type in Bool, B-O-O-L. So you need to enable the Bool Tool. And once you have that Bool Tool enabled, and I have a couple of pieces already set up, I can now just, select the parent object, select the child object that I want with a shift click. And then if you hit Control Shift B, you can see that the Bool Tool menu pops up, and you can do a difference. So if I do a difference, I did it in the wrong order because I was used to Maya. So I'll select the top object that I want to cut out of this object. Now you can use Control Shift B with difference, or you can, as you can see, it gives you the hotkey here, which is just Control number pad minus, and that's not minus on the top of the keyboard, that's minus on the number pad. So if I do Control minus, it'll cut it right out, and that looks really nice. And then, of course, I can select that object, head over to edit mode, and do the same thing. So to jump into edit mode, you can select the object, hit tab, and then if I alt click. So if you alt click the edge, then I can do a Control B for bevel, and you see we're in bevel mode, and I can start to move that, and it's live updating just like Maya. So it makes it really, really quick to, go through, quickly iterate and update your designs. And I can select this piece here, and I want to cut it out of my main object, and you can start to see that it's adding in all of the Booleans as modifiers, right? So again, I can then hit Control minus, and there it goes. It cuts out that top piece. So very, very powerful. I've been using Blender for a little bit. I've had a lot of students always telling me, oh man, I wish I could, we can model in Blender, or I wish Maya had similar Blender tools and whatnot. At the end of the day, you learn whatever software that you want, as long as the final output gives you what you want. So I was really, really happy to see that Maya now has an almost equivalent tool, Boolean tool that Blender has. So, very, very good. And, keep in mind that this is a new tool. I'd be lying if I said it did not crash. It crashed on me, a handful of times. Nothing crazy, but it did crash when I was really, really trying to push it really, really far, right? Because if you can see here, here's my Boolean whip, and you can just see all the different Booleans and all the different shapes that I used in here, and I was able to go through and really push it pretty far. And again, it maybe crashed once during this whole time, but thankfully my 2023's backup auto back kind of came in pretty nicely. Previously, it just would crash and just not be able to recover files. So that's nice, and that's good. So now you can have an equivalent inside of Maya to Blender. So hoping to create some new Blender tutorials coming up here pretty soon. I know I've been kind of missing in action here this past month or so, a bit over a month, but I should be able to get back to more regularly scheduled updates. And of course, make sure to check out the YouTube channel. Shout out to Josh Gambrel. He does, he has a ton of Boolean videos and Blender videos. You may saw the object that I made was based off of this object that he created inside of one of his Blender tutorials, and he based this off of some other guys. So it's all the same, right? So definitely shout out to him and all of his Blender videos. So And if you're looking for documentation, here's the documentation on Maya's new live Boolean tool. So be sure to check that out. So I hope you found this helpful, and I hope this workflow could be beneficial for you in the future. So good luck. Let me know if you guys are using this or if you have any issues with it down in the comments below, and I'll see you around.